my hellos and my welcomes. It is just 11 o'clock, so I do want to get started. Um, New York, I can't believe so many from across the country. New Mexico, we have Charleston, Massachusetts, Cape Cod, Uruguay. Wow. Newton, Massachusetts, Stratham, New Hampshire, wonderful. Weymouth, welcome, welcome. Oh my goodness, it's wonderful. Lancaster, love it. Hello, Jane. Good morning. So let's go ahead and jump in. Let's get started. It is 11 o'clock. Thank you all for being here and being on time. We appreciate it. I want you to know that you will be muted throughout the course of the session today. It's not because we don't want to hear from you. It's just that it'll be so many people that we want to keep the recording and the session moving as smoothly as possible. So if you need to get in touch with us, if you need to let us know something, please pop it in the chat box. There is the capacity to send a chat to me directly. I'm going to really try to be following along with you all. But if not, send it to everyone and see if and make sure that everyone gets involved in the questions that you're asking. Good morning again. My name is Kendra Morozic, and I am working with Encore Boston Network. Thank you all for being here, and thank you for attending. I have the really easy job of facilitating, but now kicking it off and introducing Mike Festa. Mike is let me go ahead and pull him up. This is going to be a fun experience for me because I have so many things on my screen that I have to make sure that. Mike, are you there?
I am unmuted now.
Yes, you are.
Sure
There
if you
you
can
are.
see me, but
There
I'm
you
here.
are. Perfect. I can see you. And everyone else can see you. So good morning, Mike. Mike Festa is our state director from AARP Massachusetts. He's the former secretary of the Executive Office of Elder Affairs and former state legislator who very well knows the challenges that people over 50 face, especially now, but throughout his career. So Mike, thank you for being here, and I'm going to toss it on over to you.
Okay, thank you, Kendra, and thanks to all of you for taking the time out to do this very important webinar, the first of 5 on mastering the job search. So yes, I'm Mike Festa. I'm the state director of AARP Massachusetts, and you know, I'd just make the obvious observation that getting a job has never been easy in many ways, and because of the circumstances of the pandemic, because of the challenges with the overall economy, it's as difficult as it's ever been. And then you add to that being over 50, and we know that that also can be a challenge of getting and keeping a job. Our goal in these webinars is to give you an edge to get that job search done and to acquire a good job. You all have amazing strengths, and we want to help you make those strengths visible to employers. That's what this series is all about. Now, the series itself was developed and brought to you by a coalition of organizations in our region. You can see them on the screen. I want to shout out to the City of Boston's Age Strong Commission, Boston Medical Center, Encore Boston Network, Job Case, Mass Hire Downtown Boston, the Massachusetts Executive Office of Elder Affairs, Operation ABLE, and of course, here ourselves at AARP Massachusetts. The webinars in this series are linked. By participating in all 5, you'll get the edge you need to succeed. Today's webinar is Getting to Know Job Search Tools and Technology. The 2 job search experts that we have for today's webinar are Patrice Ball from Operation ABLE and Wendy Gelberg from the Mass Downtown. And of course, Kendra Mrozic from Encore Boston will help us wrap things up as we finish the presentation today. So without further ado, I want to turn it over to Patty and Wendy.
Thanks, Mike. I appreciate the introduction. And this is Patty Ball from Operation Able, trying to get up out of the ocean here so I can talk to you. And I'm here with my cohort, Wendy. Wendy, could you give us a shout out and let us know who you are?
So, there we go. Hi, I was muted temporarily. I'm Wendy Gelberg. I'm with Mass Hire Downtown Boston. Welcome to everybody.
Thanks, Wendy. So today we're going to be talking about the tools and technology that are necessary for today's job search. Wendy and I have been working with clients as far as helping them with the job search process for years. And it changes and changes, it seems, all the time. But we want to tell you and help you learn the tools that are necessary for today's job search. And the thing is, there are difficulties for people of all ages to find jobs. It's not just older workers. Everybody really has these issues. And the biggest one is a lack of knowledge regarding the current job process. It's changed. It's much, much more different than it was in the past. Everything's changed. Where you look for jobs, how you look for jobs, how do you apply for jobs, how do you do an interview? When you think about it, really, everything has changed and changed again the last 3 or 4 months. I'm going to ask you right now, how many people not only never heard of Zoom 3 or 4 months ago, used Zoom at that point in time? You know, can anybody let us know, raise your hand if you actually knew it and heard of it before and actually used it? So that's a technology that is very, very different for everybody. And now we don't know who's doing who, but it does change all over the place here. So I think you know that things are online now, but how do you show people? How do you demonstrate to an employer who you are, what your skills are? You can't do that with just a resume anymore. It just doesn't say enough. It doesn't show anything about you. A lot of resumes look very, very similar. So we're going to show you the different processes that you need to know that go above and beyond a resume, but that resume itself has changed drastically. So that's really important to know. Now, the other thing that you need to know and to demonstrate is the willingness to learn new things. Well, everybody that's on here today is learning some new things. Again, Zoom has totally changed the environment. We're doing so many things by video conferences, web conferences, teleconferences, and yeah, I agree with the monkey. It's all too much here. But you're being exposed to the technologies and using them. And I can guarantee when you start looking more heavily into getting a job, one of the questions employers are going to ask you is, what did you do during this time that the world was closed down? And to be able to say, I took new courses, I tried this, I Zoomed with everybody, not just my neighbors and friends, but I practiced all these procedures. That's going to give you such a leg up on other people here. And again, the changes, how you submit a resume, who you're going to be talking to, it's so important to learn from everyone and to realize that your experience for 10 years, 20 years, even 30 years is still very valuable, but the new tools are even more critical to know and to learn and be able to use them. So I want to ask you this question because I hear it from people all the time. They see this great position online. It's like, you know that you've got this. It's like they made this position for you. So you take out your resume, dust it off, and you're like, I am so confident, I've got this job. But weeks later, you never hear anything back. You're waiting and waiting. You notice the job is now filled. It's what happened. What didn't they like about you? Has this happened to any of you out there? If you want to go down the reaction place and put your thumbs up or thumbs down, is it happened to you before? Oh, I see everybody raising their hands. We get a lot of people saying it's happened. And boy, is that confusing. It's discouraging. And when it starts happening more and more, how does that make you feel? I'm sure it doesn't make you feel good. And the more it happens, you start internalizing it and saying, what's wrong with me? Am I too old? Am I too young? Do I have not enough experience? Do I have too much experience? You start questioning every single thing about you and having these terrible feelings. And the answer may be that it has nothing to do with you at all. You know you're qualified, but there's something going on in the background and something you don't know. Obviously, everything is online. And if you don't do things in the right way that's required by the job process, you're probably going to be rejected. And it wasn't by a human. It was a robot, which means you need to know how to talk to a robot today. And he's not very attractive, is he? But you do need to know how to talk to him. And we're going to show you that process because it's so different. It wasn't a human that rejected you. It was this robot that said, I didn't like your resume. I didn't like it at all. I don't know if that makes you feel any better, but I think it will make you feel better at the end of this webinar when we show you how to deal with the robots, because that is exactly what's happening now. So how do we do this? What do we do about this process? This is what the robot sits back there and does. He just gets all these, or she, all these resumes coming in. If it doesn't fit in the right categories, if the wrong things are there, if formatting, if simple things aren't done, it's just reject, reject, reject. And that is very discouraging. This process is referred to as ATS, or applicant tracking systems. And this process is what Wendy is going to describe, because it's so sad that as qualified as you are, a human being never may see your resume ever. You were rejected by a robot. These ATS reject 75% of the resumes that are sent into them. It doesn't matter how qualified you are. It could be just a simple process because a human didn't make these determinations. In fact, it's so bad that ATS, instead of being an applicant tracking system, is being referred to as an applicant trashing system. So, Wendy, can you tell us what's going on here?
Absolutely. And I'm going to do it actually by starting with a little story and asking you your thoughts about it. You being the wider audience, I'm not speaking to Patty now, but the story involves a company. It was a major company, I believe it was Boeing, that in the early days of applicant tracking systems posted a job posting for a basic engineering job. They got lots of resumes. In response, 25,000 of them, if you can imagine that. That number, by the way, is part of the explanation of why they use robots. How can humans possibly go through that big a pile? So 25,000 resumes. My question for you all, and we'll see if we can launch a poll to get your guess, your best guess. How many of the candidates would you think the applicant tracking system said were qualified? The choices being the vast majority, 75 to 95%, 74 to 50%, 25 to 49, or 1 to 24. And if we don't have the official poll, you can just put your answer, your best guess, in the chat box. It looks like people are doing. And most of your numbers that I'm seeing are coming in on the low side. Okay, very interesting. I'm guessing these are percentages and not just straight numbers, but we'll see. See, now when I first heard the story, my guess was on the upper end because I'm thinking 25,000 candidates, basic engineering. Maybe people are overqualified, but most of them I would think have the basic qualifications. And yet, the real answer, which shocked me and may shock some of you, was 0. So this was a little bit of a trick question because none of the answers were right, but if you guessed on the low side, you're in the right ballpark. And as discouraging as that is, we now know why that happens, and we have some advice for you to get around these systems, get through these systems more successfully. So the most important thing to know is keywords. Keywords are what the applicant tracking system is looking for, and if it finds what it's looking for, you're golden, and if it doesn't, not so good. So you can be the perfect candidate. You can do that job blindfolded, one hand tied behind your back, but if the resume doesn't have the right words on it, then the applicant tracking system simply doesn't know you can do the job. So that's part of what we want to talk about today. Okay, we can move on, I believe, to the next slide. So here's an example of the degree of precision that we're talking about. If the job posting has a word multiple times, that's probably an important word. That's where you're going to find the keywords. Go back to the job posting. Here's a job posting that says marketing probably half a dozen times. If you've got the skill, your resume has to mention that you have the skill. This was an interesting job posting because it mentions marketing in several different contexts. I see the phrase marketing campaign, marketing plans, marketing budget, all of those phrases. So not even just the word marketing, but marketing in combination with other words needs to be on your resume if you're applying for this job, assuming, of course, that your background does match. So that's a piece of how exact we have to be. There's another piece that always blows me away because, again, this shows the difference between how robots process information and how humans process information. If the application is looking for the word accountant and you've listed the word accountant, you're golden. But if you've said accounting, it doesn't see that as a match. One of my favorite words in the English language to illustrate the potential for a mismatch is, let's say your job title was analyst, and the job posting says, we want somebody with strong analytical skills. The human brain, if the human were reading the resume, would see the job title and would say, if you're an analyst, I think it's a pretty good guess that you have analytical skills. I'd consider you. The applicant tracking system, on the other hand, is looking precisely for the word analytical. Analyst won't be a match. Analyze won't be a match. Analytical, I forgot which one, analytical is the one we're looking for. All of the variations won't match for the applicant tracking system, where they will, of course, for the human mind. So one of the things we want to introduce you to is a great tool called jobscan.co. That is not a typo. There's no M on the end of it. And the interesting thing, I was thinking about this morning, this particular tool is actually a robot. So we're pretty much introducing you to one robot to help you communicate better with other robots that you will encounter. And JobScan is very simple to use, actually, because all you do is copy and paste your resume into the box on the left, copy and paste the job posting into the box on the right, and it's going to produce a report for you. This one up at the top said 69% match, and it's showing you which words are in your resume that are not in the job posting, which words are in the job posting that are not in your resume, and you get to then go back, you get instant results. You get to go back to your resume and make the appropriate changes. Again, I'm assuming that you legitimately can do so. Of course, I'm not encouraging anybody to falsify anything, but if it's a matter of changing the word or adding, you've already said you're an analyst, somewhere you're going to need to say you have analytical skills if you didn't say that in the first place, and that was one of the keywords. So it's going to give you this lovely report, and that's a tool that very much can help you get on track. I usually joke when I talk about this particular site that some people have told me they absolutely swear by it. It works great for them. Other people tell me they swear at it. It doesn't work quite so well for them. It obviously works best when you really are the kind of close match that Patty was talking about earlier, where you say, man, this job posting has my name on it. It's everything I do in my job. So in those instances, this should work pretty well for you to help you identify the particular form of the word and whether or not it appears in your resume as it needs to. Bear with me for 1 second. Okay, so a few pointers for using applicant tracking systems, which you are using a huge percentage of the time. The keyword has to be an exact match. Applicant tracking systems are very literal and linear. In fact, synonyms don't work either. I forgot to mention that. If the job posting wants somebody with international skills and your resume says that your title was Global Marketing Manager, well, again, the human brain does the matching and says global equals international. It's the same thing. These systems typically don't do that. So you're going to need to go in and make those kinds of adjustments. And abbreviations and acronyms are other things you need to be careful of. If the job posting says they're looking for somebody with an MBA, and you said you have a master's in business administration, it's not a match. Or MS Office versus Microsoft Office versus any of the individual components of Microsoft Office. You said Excel and the job posting said Microsoft Office, and or vice versa. You said Microsoft Office, which includes Excel. So again, the human's going to say, oh, you've got it, but the applicant tracking system is not. A couple of other things, and some of these are formatting issues. So once we get past the basic content, the text, making sure the words align, we also have to worry a little bit about formatting, because again, you can have all the right words on the page, but if they're presented in a way that the system can't find them, again, it's as if they're not there. So one example of that is if you've used the feature in Microsoft Word called headers and footers. That's the feature that allows you to put text at the top or at the bottom that then gets carried over onto second and third pages. Sometimes people will use the header feature for their contact information. And that way, if there's a page 2, the contact information is on both pages if they get separated, which makes sense, again, if there's a human reader. But for an applicant tracking system, here's the problem. Those systems don't read the text that's in the header. So I think some of those engineers who were fully qualified for that position at Boeing, I think some of them used the header feature. They were absolutely qualified, but the system couldn't figure out who they were or how to get in touch with them because that information was in a header. So if you've used that feature, that alone could be the single reason you're getting stuck and not getting through these systems. Another reason, again, a formatting reason, tables don't get read properly. You may have set up a table, if you've used a table, assuming that the reader is going to read, let's say, across the page. And in fact, perhaps the applicant tracking system is reading vertically, not horizontally. So the text gets all scrambled. Avoiding tables and columns is the safest thing to do. The same thing with templates. And many times people find these gorgeous, gorgeous templates that exist in the universe now. And they're just beautiful. But the interesting thing about applicant tracking systems now is the attractiveness of the resume matters a little less perhaps than when a human reads it. And sometimes the attractiveness and the formatting features get in the way. Templates often use text boxes. Those don't get read. Any text that's in a text box doesn't get read. So watch out for those. Save your resume as a Word doc and not as a PDF. Some systems can read PDFs, but you never know for sure which ones. So the safest, and we have up-to-date information on this, generally speaking, a Word doc is your safest bet. Lines and borders can sometimes interfere. Special characters can be a problem. Somebody saying didn't know that about text boxes. Yeah, and text boxes can be beautiful for the human reader. You set something off in a box that really pops off the page, and here's the most compelling piece of my background. I want you to see this great achievement I've had, and it disappears. So you want to be careful about that. Point number 5, special characters. And this one frustrates me enormously. Any character that's on your basic keyboard, you're fine with. But characters that are not on your keyboard, and here's what frustrates me. If there's anybody in our group today whose name happens to be Renee, and there's an accent on your E, or your name is Jose, and there's an accent on your E, that accent is not on the keyboard. It doesn't show up. That letter will get converted to some other symbol. We don't always know which one, it depends. There are over 400 different applicant tracking systems. They're all formatted slightly differently. So this is sort of common denominator information. And I saw a question. I would tend to stay away from columns because you just don't know for sure how these systems are going to be reading those things. We also recommend that you use a font that's a sans serif font, 11-point size or more. We have a Renee, but without an accent, I see in the chat. If the accent had been there, you'd have had a problem. And I hate telling people, please misspell your name for purposes of applicant tracking systems. In your case, it's, there wasn't an accent. But for those who have an accent or who might have an accent in a word within the body of the resume, or a superscript or a subscript, sometimes if you're a chemist and you're talking about formulas, H2O or something like that, and you've got a subscript, that's not going to get read properly. 11-point size or greater will be read cleanly. You, of course, want to check spelling and grammar. Spelling, if it isn't an exact match, the computer isn't going to be, of course, the human's not going to like it if you misspell something either, but at least the human will recognize the word you intended. The computer won't even recognize what the intent was. Whenever possible, if your job title matches the title you're applying for, you're golden. If not, I use me as an example sometimes because the title my organization gave me is Career Navigator. Most organizations would call me a career coach. A job posting will say career coach. I need to say career coach on my resume to match a job that I might apply for if I were to do that. We say don't get fancy, no period. Oh, right, periods and phone numbers. We see that on a lot of resumes now. That seems to be a contemporary design that a lot of people have adopted. Applicant tracking systems don't know to read that as a phone number. So you need the old-fashioned dash, and also avoid the parentheses around the area code. Just area code dash, exchange dash, final 4 digits. Graphics, logos, images don't get read by these systems. So those are all formatting things to keep in mind along with the basic content. So follow these rules, and if you are a match, the system will recognize it. And resume as a word with accent marks also is a good example of what doesn't work. And this is how it might show up on the other end. So the system is not going to see, if it's looking for the word resume, it's not going to see that the word R question mark, SUM question mark matches the word resume. All right, and back to Patty to tell you, now that you have a resume that works, what to do with it.
Thanks, Wendy. Boy, that's a lot to remember. It's really unbelievable that how much things have changed. I mean, before you just took something out on paper, walked in and handed it to someone. That just doesn't work anymore. They'll just send you right out the door again. So what do we use? How do you find these jobs? There's so many sites out there, so many sites, so little time. Do you have to use every one of them? Which one is the best one to use? So sometimes you're like, I'm just going to send it out and hope somebody gets it. I'm just going to apply and use all these sites out there. Well, that's a lot of work, especially when you start getting replies in every day or every week with the same sites over and over, the same job positions. It's like, well, I just got this one from this site and I just got this one. How do I get all the different sites? Is there anything else that will help me? Well, should you use more than one? Absolutely. Do you need to use all of them? Absolutely not. All right, there's some that are better than others. And there's they're all good, but you need to really pick and choose. I'm going to throw it out there and say some of the ones that seem to be the best, that everybody tells me seems to work for them. The first one is Indeed. It's a very, very good site. A lot of companies use it to post their jobs on it. So I do recommend that one. The second one, you have to be on LinkedIn, and you have to use it for more than just putting yourself up there. The best usage of LinkedIn is to find jobs. It's a great place not only to find the jobs themselves, to learn about a company. All the companies are on it, and that's going to be the first place that they go to look for you. So keep that in mind too. If they're using it and they're using it to find out information about you, well, you can find out all this information about them also. That's pretty critical to know. But the other one that I have found useful that people don't really know about is Google for Jobs. Now, that's not jobs for Google or working at Google. That'd be really nice. But this is a special part of Google that focuses on finding a job. Remember when I mentioned that when you're on all these sites and you start getting in all these responses, and many of them are for the same jobs you applied for in this site and this site and this site. That's one of the things that Google does, is it just takes one job from one of those sites and it has that posted up there. So you're not seeing it multiple times. It also has a great filtering capacity. You can filter it by the location, if you want part-time, if you want full-time. Tons of information. You can check salary information right there. It'll also recommend similar jobs that you can apply for. It has a special section for veterans. I don't know how many veterans are out there, but I bet there's quite a few. And you're saying, well, is there something special for me? Well, you betcha. Google has some great things. And the one thing is Google is one of the sites that doesn't partner with, Indeed is one of the sites that doesn't partner with Google for Jobs. So that's another reason to go on both of those. You may try another one, say from all the other choices. And I know in some of these other workshops, they'll be discussing some of the other sites, and be sure to attend those webinars also, because again, as we said, employers are going to ask you, what have you been doing during all this time? If you said, I've gone to this webinar, that webinar, this one, I've been taking learning, that's really going to help you in the long run. This might be kind of a bad word for some of you if I say social media. Well, LinkedIn itself is social media, and obviously Facebook and Twitter are, but obviously the majority of people are on Facebook and Twitter, including nearly every single company and business out there. So what if an employer says to you, well, what do you know about us? Why do you want to work for us? You could say, look, I looked you up on LinkedIn. I follow your Facebook site. I follow your posts on Twitter. And so I learned these things about you. You want to, though, make sure that you have your Facebook in your Twitter pages set up professionally. And I don't mean by a professional, but you know what things you probably need to remove. But these are the things that employers want to know. More than just your resume. Your resume is very static, doesn't show you. That's one of the reasons they're using social media, not to rule you out, but to rule you in as a good candidate. They say, gee, this person has a lot of great values. Look at how they are with their grandchildren, with their friends. They love socializing. They're enthusiastic. They have all hardworking. Did you ever use those words on a resume? They don't really mean anything to an employer, but if you can demonstrate it on social media, what a benefit that is for you. So there's some great things. You can also use what they call job alerts. You can set that up on Google or Indeed or in some of the individual company sites. That means the information is going to come to you. And there's also, I'm going to turn this back to Wendy, some brand new interviewing trends. Wendy?
All right. As you can imagine, right now, there's not a lot of in-person interviewing taking place. So it's good that so many of you indicated earlier on that you've been on Zoom before, you're getting comfortable interacting with other people using that particular tool and others like it, because that actually was beginning to enter the picture prior to our sheltering at home. But obviously right now it's pretty much the only game in town, except that there are a couple of variations. So we do want you to mention, I mean, to be aware, I'm sorry, I saw a little chat that had the word mention in it. We want you to be aware that when you do get it applied using some of the sites that Patty mentioned, it's likely to be in a format such as this: a Zoom interview, a Skype interview, Google Meet, and we want to make sure you're comfortable with video interviews, as comfortable as you can be, given that you're talking to a machine. I was thinking about it this morning, and I was thinking, in a way, it's funny that we're all a little bit uncomfortable at first when we start doing these kinds of things, but most of us aren't that uncomfortable talking to a human being through a phone. So it really, you can get just as comfortable talking to your computer, being alone in a room or alone in your house, talking to a machine with nobody else around. With a Zoom interview or a Skype interview, Google Meet, it's going to be interactive. You're going to see the other person on the other side. And the only difference between a regular in-person interview and one of these interviews is that you're not in the same room together, but you are talking to somebody through a computer. It does still feel awkward for many people, especially those of you who are less experienced with these, or maybe have only used Zoom for webinars and you haven't actually spoken through the computer. A couple of things, just one point that I always like to make, which is that it's important to know when you are talking to another human being through the computer, though the temptation is to look directly at the screen where you see the person's face and it feels like you're making contact, to them it actually looks as if you're looking down. So we encourage you to make sure you're looking directly at the camera on your computer. I have a little white dot at the top of my screen. That's what I'm trying to remember to look at. If it feels awkward, I've read articles that suggest putting a little sticky on your computer that says smile to remind you to loosen up and relax a little bit, or have a photo of a family member or somebody that makes you feel good and you relax, and get rid of the tense, I'm on an interview expression, and get that, oh, I feel good, there's somebody who makes me smile, kind of a thing. I've known people who have had stuffed animals in the room with them. They talk to the animals, whatever works for you, but just you really do want to come across as confident and sure of yourself and comfortable and relaxed and warm and friendly. In addition to those kinds of interviews, which we're reasonably familiar with, there's another kind. And this is something you need to at least be aware might come your way. And this is a different kind of an interview because you are not directly interacting with another human being. You are interacting only with the computer and you are being recorded. So that comes in two varieties that I'm aware of. One is the situation where you are given questions in advance and you're told, click on this link when you're ready, start, you click go and start recording your answers. And there's a time limit. There's usually a practice session, and the ones that I'm aware of usually give you 2 opportunities, and then you decide which one you think is best and you submit that. The other variation on that theme is, instead of getting the questions ahead of time, you sit in front of the computer screen and the questions come on the computer screen, and then you answer them without any opportunity to think about your answers ahead of time. They're probably going to be the same kinds of questions you would get if by a human being, but I think it's even more disconcerting not to have another human being virtually in the room with you. So that is another option that we want you to know about. If you're not comfortable with this, if this is new to you, use your smartphone if you have one, record yourself, practice, get feedback, look at yourself, see what you think you did well. And that's, you just get comfortable with experience doing it. So that is what we can tell you for now about virtual recording. I'm seeing some chats, some people are losing audio. I don't know if that's affecting everybody. In any event, I will turn this back to Patty.
All right, thanks so much, Wendy. I mean, it is so much knowledge to keep in mind here. There's so many things, but really, you made it through this Zoom. You made it through the things that have been recently happening. We have a lot of faith, but we offer a lot of support for you also to be able to do these things. So what I want to do is just sum up some of the things from this webinar, the key points. Just be aware that ATS systems are being used by almost every company out there. They're based on keywords and some formatting options, but they're critical. If you need help with this, obviously anybody that's part of this conference is going to let you know these things. You want to use multiple search options, not too many of them, but try different ones, and I highly recommend the ones that I spoke about. Be aware of the different interviewing techniques that are out there, the ones that Wendy mentioned in particular. You want to learn what they are. You want to practice these new tools and new technologies. Practice doing Zooms with your friends, with your family, and as Wendy says, with your teddy bear, if that helps, or any of these different systems that will make you more comfortable. It's going to be happening. It's going to be happening more than it's ever happened before. So I want to thank you for attending this webinar, and for myself, Patty Ball from Operation Able, and Wendy Gelberg from Mass Hired Downtown Boston. And before we go, there's just a couple things here. Is I want to talk to or ask Kendra that you've been monitoring the chat through this. We have time for a couple questions. Can you let us know what those questions are, and
Yes,
either
ma'am.
Wendy or I can answer some of them?
Absolutely. Let me switch over. A couple, there's a shout out to Wendy, that someone knew you from Norwood Employment Office and that you were wonderful. So high five to Wendy. Someone mentioned that they never used Zoom before. Is this a primary platform, or are there others? Wendy or Patty, do you know?
This one, I'm not quite sure why Zoom took off specifically out of the various ones that are out there, but it does seem to be one that's caught hold, and it's very user friendly. So I would say it is one of the ones that's most frequently used right now, as far as I know. Do you have a different sense, Patty?
No, I mean, I think it caught on because it was easy. It was some of the ones, I mean, video conferencing's been around for years. And I know, though, it was used by big companies. Zoom became very friendly, and there's other small ones. Now everybody is racing to it. This Microsoft is with Microsoft Teams. Google is hot on the trail. This happened so fast to the world, literally. I don't know why Zoom took off either, but it's easier for that type of thing. And everybody wants ease of use, and they just happen to be in the right place at the, I hate to say right time, but they were there.
Right.
Yeah.
And several people are noting that it's free. They made it available
Right.
to everybody for free.
Right,
So,
right.
Yeah, that's important.
Great. I also wanted to mention, I saw a couple of times people have been asking, yes, the slides and a recording of this webinar and the following 4 webinars will all be available to you. It'll come through a follow-up email from AARP, and will bring you to exactly where we're leaving leaving links to both the presentation and the recording of the webinar, so that you can get Wendy and Patty's play-by-play information right from the horse's mouths. And in addition to that, we'll also send out any other answers that we aren't able to get to in the next minutes, but just wanted to mention those things before I keep moving on to the next. Someone said, I wish I had bought stock in Zoom. You and me both. Let's see. Supposedly 75% of resumes don't even make it past the computer screen stage. What's your top way to make it past that first cut?
You want to go first, Wendy?
Well, the top way I think is going to be having as close a keyword match as possible. I'll say one other thing that also matters: how quickly you apply can matter, because employers can, and some do, stop the process after they've received a certain number that they've designated of resumes that qualify. So once they've hit that magic number, if your resume comes in later, even if you're a great match, they won't even see you. So I would say applying promptly helps as well.
And I'd also like to mention, keep it simple, keep it clear. A lot of us, obviously, every single thing you've ever done is important, but don't put it on your resume. You want something that the employers can see quickly, can read quickly. You know, they're going to spend, if it gets to a human, the employer's only going to spend 6 seconds looking on it. So they want to find the information fast. So whatever you're doing, make sure it's visible, make sure it's clear. Don't get fancy. It's so different from what we're used to do. We used to go out and buy a fancy paper, fancy envelopes, you know, use these fancy templates, thinking we're going to show up. No, you're going to get rejected by a robot now. Keep it simple.
Yep. Wendy, this is a question for you. Should we prepare one version of our resume for the ATS system and another version with headers and text boxes for in-person networking and interviews?
You certainly can. I would actually clarify that you're probably going to have multiple versions of your resume for applicant tracking systems, but you could certainly have a prettier one if you wanted to, that's more appealing to the human eye. And many people do that. It's not essential, but it can be helpful.
And for the text in headers and footers, does that mean no text at all, or is it okay to put your name and page number or contact information in the header of the second page?
It won't be seen.
Yeah,
right? I mean, if you're bringing it in, that's fine. You can make it look what you want, but anything that's going to be sent in any way is, if it's in a header or footer, it's not going to be seen. So even if it's on the second page, you're going to put your name on it and a page number, it's not going to be seen by the robot systems. It will by a human.
Great.
Yeah, so as long as the name is typed as a regular line of text on page 1, if you choose to have a header with other information for pages 2 and beyond, you can, as long as it's not essential information. You can use it, it just won't get read.
Great. Another question came in. Will you be sharing a suggested resume format, or where could we find one?
It wasn't something we had thought about ahead of time. I certainly have resumes, you may as well, Patty, that
yes,
we could make one available, I would think, and add that to the packet of materials we send out.
Sure. That's easy to do. If you're applying for creative or field design positions, how else can you stand out style-wise if you shouldn't be including logos and the more creative fieldy design stuff?
Great question, and everybody in the design world asks similar questions, because the resume is an opportunity to showcase your great skills, and yet we're telling you can't do it. So my suggestion is basically submit the resume, the ugly version of your resume, where you have to get through the system, but then find the hiring manager, use LinkedIn or whatever other means, and send that person direct mail the old-fashioned way and say, I did apply online as the job posting requested, but I wanted you to see a work sample, or include in your resume a reference to where they can find work samples, because yeah, that's what you want them to see.
Yeah,
Right.
I agree with Wendy, but I think here's a perfect opportunity to use social media for good things. And on
Hmm.
your LinkedIn profile, you can add all sorts of media. I would put
Right.
it there. I would
Uh-oh, Patty.
always have a link on those things.
Great.
Yeah, you're
Perfect.
absolutely right about using LinkedIn that way. That's great.
Nick asks, is it only acceptable to use chronological resume? How about functional chronological? If you want to change your career direction, we have a few of those career shifters.
Right.
How does that impact your resume?
Great question and frustrating answer, I'm afraid. Um, when I'm seeing a message on my screen, internet connection is unstable. I know we just
Oh, I
lost
saw
Patty
that.
briefly. I don't know if mine's going to drop out, but in any event, yeah, these systems really only know how to make sense out. So chances are, if you're a career changer, your background is not going to be the closest match anyway. And so your best bet is going to be networking. And then you can use whatever version of your resume best presents you. And hopefully people in your network can help get
Great.
you in front of the hiring
Mhm.
manager. That would be my answer. I don't know if Patty, if you have a different thought.
Well, the thing about an ATS is it's like a database. So it has categories of fields, and it's going to look at your resume and it's just going to yank things out of it. It's not going to see any kind of formatting. So you need to have very specific categories on there. So usually on, say, a functional resume, they break it out into the categories instead of having experience in there. So I think it's going to throw off an ATS. If you want to bring it in, if you get the interview, that may be a good way to do it. But in ATS, I agree with Wendy, is it's going to get confused by it.
Absolutely. We have a few more minutes, so those people who are holding in with us, we had a couple people drop off, but I'm going to keep going if that's okay with everybody. Should you apply for jobs directly on websites, or go through the career searches and apply through them? What is the recommended route?
Patty, why don't you take that?
I don't think it matters. I think you have to follow what it says in the job description. If they say apply here, apply there. LinkedIn does have, and it's just because it's a great site. I mean, obviously they're not paying me to say this, but it has an easy, that'd be nice. I'll talk about it all day, but they have an easy apply feature on it. Google for Jobs has an easy apply to a lot of these companies, but it's fine to apply right on the website. If that's what they're telling you to do, then absolutely do it.
Great. Perfect. Does monster.com exist anymore, or is that totally gone? Says Rachel.
I thought it was gone myself, but it seems to have been made a resurgence.
Oh, I
And
didn't know that.
I was shocked. I just don't hear about it anymore, but I guess one of my clients had mentioned it and I went, maybe I should check it out again. It's still there. So, I mean, I would look at it, maybe try it,
Okay.
maybe put it in your arsenal of other sites that you're looking at. I haven't used it in years, but I do think, and especially for the future type things, check them out. Just don't overwhelm yourself with these things.
Sure. Wendy, does the cover letter also get read by ATS, or are those just downloaded and made available?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And basically, no. It's the ATS is going to read the resume. If if the job application gives you a separate place to upload a cover letter, by all means do that. If it doesn't give you a separate box for that and you want to include a cover letter, I recommend making it a bottom page, because the applicant tracking system is going to give you more credit for keywords found on page 1 than on page 2 or successive pages, and more credit for the words that are higher on the page than, because again, they're more recent. And that's one of the things they look to see. How recently have you used a skill? Cover letters, because they're less precise than resumes, just don't often get scanned in the first place. They might get read later on, but don't count on it being read at all, or by being
Sure.
read by tracking systems.
Sure. All right, I'll do a few more. Anthony asked, should LinkedIn ID be listed on my resume?
Yes.
Yes.
Beautiful, one word answer. I love it.
Yeah.
What
Yeah.
about
There's the URL,
Ros-
though. Don't all the numbers and letters and symbols. Make sure you've cleaned it up so it's
Yep.
just got your name on it. But yes, absolutely.
Yes, you can edit it to be what you want the URL to be. So that's good. What about Craigslist?
Mhm.
I haven't used it or heard of anybody using it for jobs, so I don't want to say one way or the other. I haven't heard somebody mention and say they've had good luck or bad luck with it, so I don't have a comment on it.
All right.
I haven't heard people mention it in years back, when this whole online process was new. I heard people finding jobs in smaller, 1 or 2 person operations. Some of them are sketchy, some of them are legit. You have to be careful.
Okay.
I would say be careful.
Good. And this has been a big thing as of Am I still here? Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay. I went out for a minute. I saw myself go out for a minute.
Yeah, the internet thing keeps giving messages. It's weird.
Yeah. Due to the prevalence of identity theft, what are your thoughts on sharing your social media publicly? Is it, do you recommend keeping your personal and professional profile separate? What are your thoughts on that, if you have any?
You have full control over social media. I don't know if people don't realize that or don't
Right.
take the control, or what, exactly the way they have it set up. I think you always, first of all, we exist everywhere. We're out there, all of us, and people can find out almost everything about us. I would make sure that your profiles are cleaned up. You can also have them shared with certain audiences. I wouldn't go silent or dark on it, because again, if you're not there, if employers can't find you, just think about the things that they might be assuming. So I would make sure I could be seen, but again, I would go into the setting on those various sites and see what you want to share with whom. Like if you don't want to share your pictures, you can turn that feature off. There's also a whole bunch of things that you have much more control over than you may realize.
Right.
Some of these social media sites do an upgrade, they introduce new features or whatever. Sometimes with Facebook in particular, the privacy settings go back to whatever the neutral settings were to begin with. So I do think it's worth checking them periodically to make sure they didn't somehow change back to generic settings.
Many of them are giving you warnings about that now, or not a warning, just say, you know, you haven't checked this in a while. Do you want to go in and check this information on it? So all your companies, because of a lot of reasons, are much more concerned about privacy than they used to be. So just like anything else, be careful. But if they're determined, people are going to find out information about you everywhere.
Beautiful. All right. Well, I first and foremost just want to thank Patty and Wendy for their wonderful information, their wonderful presentation. You guys are obviously veterans at the whole presenting process. So thank you so much for your engagement and your interaction. Both of you did a wonderful job. This information was incredibly useful. There has been a few questions popping up in the chat box. I'm sorry that we didn't get to all of them, but we will try to get to them either in future webinars or if we can attach some frequently asked questions in the, what is it called? In the email that we send out, we will do that. I wanted to remind you that the email will come out within the next 24 hours with the recording, the presentation, and any other additional information that we are able. It'll point you towards the Encore Boston Network website. The recording slides, all of that. Please, please, please join us for our next webinar. We have set up for next week. Next Wednesday, same time, same place. It is called The Secrets of Searching for Job Opportunities on Wednesday, May 27th, again at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. I hope that you enjoyed today. Thank you to Patty and Wendy, and for all of our organizations that came together to make this possible. You can sign up for the webinar through the same process that you went through to sign up for this one. And we will also include that in the follow-up email that we send out. Amy, are we able to launch a poll or no?
We're going to try.
Okay.
If this doesn't work, we've already gotten lots of thank yous in the chat, but if this poll does not work, would you spend just a couple of minutes and chat and let us know, you know, to what extent this was valuable to you on a scale from 1 to 10, and anything that we could do going forward that would make it more helpful, or just anything you want to tell us. So everybody, here we go. We're going to see if it works. Oops, wrong one. That's not the one we want. There's supposed to be a second poll. You know what? Let's not worry about it. Let's just have people respond.
We'll do it.
I came up with the first poll and not the second. Okay?
Sure. Absolutely. All right. We will do that. Please send us any thumbs up or things that we can do better next time. And I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your Wednesday. Thank you so much for joining us, and hope to see you next week.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Well,
Take
bye.
care.
Stay well.
Thank you very much. You too.
Hey, you're welcome.
Oh, someone's got a phone call coming in.
Not me.
Yes, I thought I had unplugged. Apparently the phone needs to be unplugged in 2 different places.
Yeah, no,
Bye. Thank you.
Okay, can we
Thank you.
leave this now? We just leave? I'm going to dive back in.
Yeah. Patty's going for a swim.
Yeah.
Thank you, everyone.
Take care. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thanks, Wendy. Good to see you again.
Thank you all. Bye.
Wendy, you've got some big fans.
I've been, as somebody said, I was in the Norwood Care Center before I came to Boston. So I know people all over the state.
Oh, beautiful.
And she's
Well,
doing great webinars for Mass Hire as well.
You should have a lot of fans. You did a great job. Both of you, outstanding. And Kendra, you're our glue.
The way Patty does. It's very measured. It's very nice.
Thanks, Kendra. Bye,
Thank
everybody.
you. Bye. Take
Okay.
care. I'm ending this. We'll see you soon.
Okay.